You're listening to the Luminate series on the Forward Faster podcast, providing bite-sized insights for entrepreneurs in the optics, photonics, and imaging sector.
Every epic project known to humanity from Stonehenge to CERN has begun as a research proposal. You simply cannot have a scientific career without developing the skills to convince strangers to give you enormous sums of money. I am reading from a new book, Grant Writing from the Ground Up by Damon W. Diehl. Damon is, in addition to being a published author and expert grant writer, he is the technology program manager at the Luminate Accelerator. I'm Kate Leonard with NextCore, and I'm here today with Damon to talk about his book. Damon,
Hi.
welcome. Hello. So first off, congratulations on the book. It's fantastic to be published. And I also want to let you know that I read the book and have been highlighting all the parts that I found hilarious, and there's a lot of highlighting in the book.
Good.
So
Yeah.
it's clever, it's packed with tips, it's packed with cartoons, lots of funny footnotes. I'm not your target audience, right? I don't write proposals. I'm surrounded by people who do or who need to convince people to give them money. And as someone who's not in your target audience, I still found it helpful, but also just very entertaining. So I think it's something that, you know, if you are in Damon's target audience, you definitely need to check this out. But if you're even kind of peripheral to that, it's still something that's highly entertaining.
You know that I work in this very narrow field of optical engineering, but I worked for nonprofits. I've been on the board of two different nonprofits that are arts related, and it's the same secret process that I follow. So there's what I call a magic trick for getting to your rough draft.
Well, we won't give that away, but I guess speaking of teasers, I mentioned already that it's just loaded with tips. Maybe there are a few that rise to the top. The very first chapter is why should you read this book? But maybe I can pose that question to you and give your pitch for the book.
This book grew out of teaching a class for the Engineering Society, SPIE, which is for scientists and engineers for early career. And the thing that you realize pretty quickly when you work with scientists and engineers that's unique to them is that they have this wealth of knowledge that they already have. And they get to writing a research grant proposal, and it's done the opposite of prepare them for what they need to do. Because, and the thing I put in there twice is that a grant is not a grade, and a proposal is not a paper. Because as a scientist, you've gone through this history of your life where if you do something good enough, you get a good grade. And that's not the way a grant works. It's not an essay contest. It is based on having the best project. What you're doing is proposing a project, and you only have to write well enough to explain your project. I also say that this is not a writing book. This book is very small. It's the least that someone needs to know to write a grant. And that was the other motivation, was how can we write something as short as possible that is digestible quick.
You know, we've kind of laughed about how your goal with this book was not to get rich, but the idea is to be helpful, to help people write better proposals so that they secure more.
Yeah, this book had to appeal to two people. First of all, it had to appeal to people who are reviewers. They had to read this book and say, this covers all the things that we wish someone had when they write a proposal. And on the other end, you have to have it interesting enough that the target audience will read it. Reviewers don't want to read bad proposals. Here in the Luminate program, we get hundreds of applications and we have 10 spaces, right? And the first thing that you do is cut out half of them. I want to have less of those proposals that just get thrown out at the beginning. And so the goal of this book at the fundamental level is, how does someone create a proposal that is responsive? Because that gets you out of that 50% on the bottom right away. And then the other part of the book is, how do you create something that is going to win? Because secretly reviewers want to be delighted, right? They want to read every single thing and say, wow, that's amazing. We want to have it be a hard decision.
You mention in your book mistakes to avoid. Wondering if any of that stems from personal experience.
And the answer is, of course, yes, right? I work for this organization, NextCore, now. It used to be High Tech Rochester. And my lab was in High Tech Rochester back when I worked for a startup. And when I won my first grant, High Tech Rochester asked me to come in, and I gave this little presentation on beginner's luck and rookie mistakes. So I won my first grant proposal, which was amazing, and then didn't. Our follow-up proposals were also good, but we were competing with other people. And one thing that actually came out that's kind of funny about that is that one of our proposals we lost to friends here in Rochester. And then at the end of their project, it wasn't working. So they brought us in to help on that project. And that led to this collaboration that lasted for 10 years.
So even though you didn't win, your proposal was strong enough and you were close enough to those who won that you ended up working together.
There's a whole aspect of kind of snatching a victory from the jaws of defeat.
So you mentioned that there's sort of a surprise at the end.
Yes.
For someone who's considering checking out this book, are there any maybe teasers that you can offer around what they'll learn?
The thing is, and I say it early on, is that this is a workbook. This has a method for creating a rough draft very efficiently. You can make a good proposal by just writing and rewriting and that whole thing, but usually you don't have a lot of time. And so over the years, I've come up with a method when I work with people of targeting early on what their project is and who they're writing it for, so that by the time you get to writing, you've done so much work that's probably one of the smallest chapters in the book is writing the rough draft, because
you've done all this upfront
because
work.
I've had people do so much work upfront. Getting to why you want to do research is really important before you can figure out why someone else should pay you. My point being that once you have worked yourself through that, you don't need to work through that unless you lose your identity or you lose hope or something.
Right. So it's not like every time you approach a proposal, you need to pick this up from the beginning and read it through and through.
A big part of my recommendation here, as far as being successful, is attaching yourself to people who are already successful. You can be in graduate school and have your advisor writing all of the stuff, and you leave graduate school unprepared. So integrate yourself into the writing process of grants at your university. If you do that, you build a network of people, you learn all of these skills. And that is really the first best way to also find good grants, is because you know agencies that are interested in what you do.
Just to tease this out a little bit, your book is about tips for an effective proposal, but you cover where do you look for funding? I mean, you kind of scream about the question because to you it's obnoxious because they're everywhere. However,
it's the same thing. You hear writers ask, where do you get your ideas? And in this, people ask, where do I find a grant? For some people, there is this divide between academic and industrial work, and you need to stay in this pristine academic world. And no, you need to get money from where the money will come from. And a lot of times there are sources for money that aren't your obvious places. People can get locked into, I need to get money from the National Institute of Health, or I need to get money from NSF. And those are shark tanks, right? Everybody in medicine is looking for an NIH grant. Anybody in basic research is looking for an NSF grant. However, that's not where the most money is. So the advice I give people is really think about who cares about what you care about. So my first grants were all from the Department of Defense, because if you can find something that is related to a very specific problem the Department of Defense cares about, it's all about saving people's lives. Attaching what you're doing to saving people's lives is a really good way to find money, because everybody cares about it. Every agency cares if you can say this is going to help save somebody's life.
Your book was just released. Say it's been a couple years since it was out. What do you hope happens?
What I would like to see happen is that the quality of proposals goes up. I want to change the world.
You want to change the world. You want to make a reviewer's process harder because they're getting better proposals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really
you heard it here.
do. Yeah.
So this book is available through SPIE. Can you talk about the connection there?
This grew out of a class that SPIE asked me to put together. And so it was kind of visionary for them to think about, can they do something to help people write better research proposals? I was asked, can you make this class interactive? The key to it, though, was working out how can I get small groups of people working together. And I have them work on these really absurd research projects. And the reason for that is that it lets everybody set their ego aside. So when I realized that there was this space for kind of wild ideas, I was able to run with it. And so that led to this really fun and interactive class. And that's why this book is so interactive.
So the cover is phenomenal. And there's also all sorts of drawings and little characters in here, including this druid on page 1.
Yeah, my friend Matt Moore, who did the illustrations, he came up with that character. And it was just so expressive.
I mean, I've said it a few times, but I really did find it highly entertaining, and those help. So to grab your copy of Grant Writing from the Ground Up, it's available through SPIE, and we'll put the link in the description box. They even have some sample pages available, so you can get a closer look at some of those cartoons and fun footnotes that we've been talking about. So thanks again for tuning into Forward Faster. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.